So then the question came to me, do I believe in God? And I don't like that question. And people have complained at me a lot, and I'm sure they have their reasons because they don't like my answers, and I have two answers.
Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist who rose to global fame by offering an antidote to the chaos of modern life. His central message has always been one of strength, urging individuals to stand up straight with their shoulders back and voluntarily carry the heaviest load they can imagine. But behind this formidable public facade, a devastating war was quietly being waged. This was not a battle of ideas, but of biology, a rebellion from within his own body that culminated in a near-total physical collapse in 2025, pushing him to the very brink of death. What could possibly dismantle the man who built his entire philosophy on enduring hardship? His daughter, Mikhaila, later described this harrowing period as a true near-death experience, a time that was exceedingly difficult and terrifying for the entire family. The foundation of tragedy. The story of Jordan Peterson's physical decline begins at the same moment as his meteoric rise to fame. In 2016, while working as a respected psychology professor at the University of Toronto, he uploaded a series of videos to YouTube. In these videos, he publicly objected to a Canadian government proposal known as Bill C-16, which he argued could compel citizens to use specific gender pronouns. These videos went viral, transforming him almost overnight from a relatively unknown academic into a global intellectual figure who was both celebrated and condemned. This sudden fame brought with it an enormous and unrelenting amount of pressure. He found himself at the center of media storms, facing protests on university campuses, and dealing with constant criticism from fellow academics. In 2018, the publication of 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos, amplified this pressure exponentially. The book's incredible success propelled him into a grueling international speaking tour that spanned hundreds of cities across North America, Europe, and Australia. Night after night, he would stand before thousands of people, delivering complex lectures on psychology, mythology, and philosophy. The intellectual and physical demands of this schedule were immense, and the constant travel, combined with the stress of being a controversial public figure, began to take a heavy toll on his health. To manage long-standing health issues, Peterson had already adopted an extremely restrictive diet. Beginning in 2018, he consumed only beef, salt, and water, a regimen known as the carnivore diet. This diet was recommended by his daughter, Mikhaila, who had used it to control the severe symptoms of a serious autoimmune disorder that afflicted them both. For decades, Peterson had struggled with debilitating psoriasis, painful uveitis, which is an inflammation of the eye, and a persistent, severe depression that had shadowed him for most of his life. While the all-meat diet seemed to help manage some of his autoimmune symptoms, it also placed his body under a unique and constant form of biological stress. As he was navigating this intense period of fame and physical strain, a devastating personal tragedy struck his family. In 2019, his wife, Tammy, whom he had been married to for 3 decades, was diagnosed with an extremely rare and aggressive form of kidney cancer called Bellini duct carcinoma. The initial prognosis from her doctors was terminal, giving her only a few months to live. This catastrophic news shattered Peterson's world. The profound anxiety over his wife's health, layered on top of his exhausting work schedule, pushed his nervous system to its absolute breaking point. To cope with his pre-existing anxiety, Peterson had been prescribed a benzodiazepine medication called clonazepam back in 2016. In early 2019, following his wife's grim diagnosis, his doctor increased the dosage. However, this increase had an opposite or paradoxical effect, making his anxiety far worse instead of better. He quickly developed a severe physical dependence on the medication. When he and his family recognized the problem and attempted to stop the drug, his body plunged into a horrific withdrawal syndrome. The process of withdrawing from benzodiazepines is widely recognized in medicine as one of the most agonizing and dangerous experiences a person's nervous system can endure. It induced a condition called akathisia, an unbearable state of inner restlessness and an inability to stay still that many have described as a form of living torture. His nervous system was in a state of complete and total collapse. Russia, Serbia, and a brush with death. By the end of 2019, Jordan Peterson's condition had become dire. The benzodiazepine withdrawal symptoms were so severe that he was barely functional, tormented by constant terror and unable to think clearly. The conventional medical treatments available in North American hospitals proved ineffective for his extreme case. Feeling they had no other options, his family made a desperate and high-risk decision. In January 2020, they flew him to Moscow, Russia, to undergo a radical and unproven treatment. In a Russian hospital, doctors placed Peterson into a medically induced coma for 8 days. The theory behind this procedure was to allow his body to pass through the most brutal phase of the drug withdrawal while he was unconscious, thereby sparing him the unimaginable psychological and physical pain. The procedure, however, was fraught with danger. While in the coma, he developed a life-threatening complication, severe pneumonia in both of his lungs. After being brought out of the coma, he was in a fragile state and had to remain in the intensive care unit, ICU, for 4 weeks. There, he fought for his life against the pneumonia while also dealing with the severe neurological aftermath of the withdrawal. When he finally regained full consciousness, he discovered that the ordeal had left him with significant neurological damage. His motor skills were severely impaired. He could no longer walk properly and struggled with basic coordination. Simple, once automatic actions like buttoning a shirt or typing on a keyboard now required immense concentration and deliberate effort. Once his condition stabilized enough for travel, he was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Belgrade, Serbia, in February 2020. He spent the next several months there, undergoing intensive physical and neurological therapy. The recovery was a slow and painful process of relearning how to control his own body. In June 2020, the public saw him for the first time since the crisis began in a video update posted by his daughter. The world was shocked by his appearance. He was gaunt, pale, and visibly frail, and his voice trembled as he spoke. He confessed that this experience had forced him to confront the absolute limits of his own physical being. The man who had famously taught millions to stand up straight and bear their burden now had to learn how to take a single step. This first great tragedy revealed a stark truth, that no amount of willpower can overcome the fundamental biological limits of the human body. A fragile recovery and lingering tragedy. In the years following his return from Eastern Europe, Jordan Peterson entered a period that, on the surface, looked like a recovery. During this time, the family received a piece of miraculous news. Against all odds, his wife Tammy had survived her cancer. After undergoing multiple complex surgeries and difficult treatments that doctors initially believed would fail, she was declared to be in remission. Her incredible recovery was a profound source of relief and joy for the family. But her difficult battle with cancer left behind permanent physical scars and a lingering sense of vulnerability. Professionally, Peterson worked to rebuild his public life. In 2021, he released his next book, Beyond Order: 12 More Rules for Life. He also formally resigned from his tenured professorship at the University of Toronto, citing what he described as a toxic and politically divisive atmosphere in modern academia. His family made the decision to relocate to the United States, first living in Nashville, Tennessee, before eventually settling in Arizona. He entered into a new partnership with the conservative media company, The Daily Wire, and launched the Peterson Academy, an ambitious online education platform. To the outside world, it appeared that Jordan Peterson was back. He resumed producing lectures and podcasts, engaging in interviews, and reaching his massive global audience. Beneath this surface of productivity, however, his health remained extremely fragile. The damage from the benzodiazepine withdrawal was permanent, leaving his nervous system hypersensitive to stress and prone to exhaustion. He continued to adhere to his strict all-meat diet to keep his autoimmune conditions at bay. The immense pressure of launching new business ventures and the constant demand to appear as a strong and clear-thinking public intellectual continued to drain his limited physical reserves. He was effectively performing the role of the healthy Jordan Peterson, all while his body was sending him continuous warning signals that it was still in a state of crisis. The 2025 collapse and a near-death experience. The final trigger that pushed his weakened body over the edge came from an unexpected source. In the summer of 2025, Peterson's father-in-law passed away. While helping his family clean out the old and potentially damp family home, he was unknowingly exposed to a high concentration of toxic mold. For a healthy person, this exposure might have resulted in minor issues or none at all. But for Peterson, whose body was already severely compromised by years of autoimmune disease, neurological damage, and chronic stress, this exposure was catastrophic. His health declined with shocking speed. He was diagnosed with chronic inflammatory response syndrome, or CIRS. This is a severe and complex illness that affects a subset of people with a specific genetic predisposition. In individuals with CIRS, the immune system is unable to properly clear biotoxins like those produced by mold. Instead, it launches a massive, uncontrolled inflammatory response that spreads throughout the entire body, essentially causing the body's own defense systems to attack its organs and tissues. For Peterson, the progression of the disease was rapid and brutal. It began with systemic inflammation, causing fever, severe body aches, and debilitating brain fog. The inflammation then violently attacked his lungs, leading to a case of severe pneumonia. From there, his condition escalated into sepsis, a life-threatening medical emergency. Sepsis occurs when the body's response to an infection becomes so extreme that it triggers a chain reaction that can lead to tissue damage, organ failure, and death. It is a desperate race against time for medical professionals to control. As his body failed, devastating neurological complications set in. He developed a condition known as critical illness polyneuropathy, a disorder that involves widespread damage to peripheral nerves and is common in patients who are critically ill for extended periods. This resulted in profound muscle weakness and a loss of motor control, leaving him almost completely paralyzed. He was rushed to the hospital and admitted to the intensive care unit, where he remained for nearly a month in a state where his life hung in the balance. During this time, he was too weak to communicate with his family, who could only watch and wait. In total, he spent approximately 5 months in the hospital, finally being discharged in December of 2025. Adding another layer of pain to this period, his daughter Mikhaila later shared that, on the very same day her father was admitted to the ICU, her newborn nephew also had a life-threatening heart-related scare. She described this confluence of family disasters as feeling like a spiritual attack. This entire ordeal inflicted another round of severe damage on Peterson's already fragile nervous system, forcing him to once again use his conscious will to control bodily movements that should be entirely automatic. The current situation and the long road ahead. As of early 2026, Jordan Peterson has returned to his home in Paradise Valley, Arizona. But his journey toward recovery is far from over. He remains under the constant care of a team of medical specialists, and the path forward is long and uncertain. In a public update provided in December 2025, shortly after his hospital discharge, his daughter Mikhaila offered a candid assessment of his condition. "He's still not well," she stated, "but he is not as bad as he was." She added, "We are waiting and hoping and praying for his recovery." Her words painted a clear picture of a family living in a state of fragile hope. Medical experts have indicated that recovery from the combined trauma of CIRS, sepsis, and critical illness neuropathy is a slow and non-linear process. Progress is often measured in very small steps, with the constant risk of setbacks. As a result of his condition, all of his scheduled public appearances, lectures, and tours have been canceled indefinitely, including a major event that had been planned for March 2026. He has maintained complete public silence since the crisis began in mid-2025. There have been no new lectures, no podcasts, and no interviews. the powerful public voice that once resonated with millions has fallen silent. During this profoundly difficult time, his family has become his entire world and sole support system. His daughter, Mikhaila, who was instrumental in finding treatment for him during his 2020 crisis, visits him for several hours every day. His wife, Tammy, having endured and survived her own battle with a terminal illness, now dedicates herself to caring for her husband of 35 years. His son, Julian, and his grandchildren also provide a vital source of comfort and motivation. The family unit, a topic he often spoke about as a cornerstone of a meaningful life, has now become his last and most important fortress in his moment of greatest weakness. The story of Jordan Peterson's series of health catastrophes offers a stark and sobering lesson. It reveals the enormous physical price that can be paid for carrying the weight of intellectual and public responsibility on a global scale. The immense psychological and physical stress he endured as a cultural icon was a direct contributor to his body's eventual breakdown. His core philosophy that meaning can be found by confronting suffering remains a powerful message for many. However, his own life has proven that this philosophy is not a magical shield that can protect a person from biological reality. His tragedy is a powerful demonstration that even the most disciplined and strong-willed individual has physical limits that cannot be overcome by intellect or determination alone. The fact that his final illness, CIRS, involved his own immune system turning against him is a particularly cruel and fitting metaphor for how a system designed for order can descend into self-destructive chaos. The contrast between the man he was and the man he has become is emotionally staggering. The individual who taught millions to carry their burden is now forced to lie still, completely dependent on others, and simply wait for his body to heal. The architect who drew complex maps of meaning to help people navigate their lives now finds himself lost in the dark and unfamiliar territory of his own physical limitations. The ultimate lesson from his suffering is not one of failure, but one of profound humanity. It shows that when all the rules, all the willpower, and all the philosophy are stripped away, what remains is the simple, quiet necessity of continuing on. It suggests that true strength in the face of overwhelming odds is not found in grand pronouncements, but in quiet endurance and the steadfast love of family. Jordan Peterson's tragedy does not invalidate his life's work. It instead adds a layer of tragic, undeniable authenticity to it. What is the most important lesson you take away from Jordan Peterson's ordeal? Which rule, not from his books, but from the story of his own life, will you carry with you?